Thank you, Pradeep. Good afternoon, everybody, and many thanks to IPGA and IMCC for having asked me to talk about Tuar and its prospects. Today, we shall discuss the current situation with the trade for Tuar and what can be done going forward to restore the volumes that were once traded. In the years prior to 2017, which is when the quantitative restrictions were introduced, the crop in Myanmar was between 250 and 300,000 tons. Africa then was not much of a factor as it is today, and India primarily looked to Myanmar to cover its deficit. Myanmar Tuar production in 2015 was 300,000 tons, but it slid now to 80,000 tons this year, as the farmers are not sure if India has the requirement to take a volume such as 250,000 tons, which was very normal earlier. In January this year, when the Myanmar crop started, there was a carry forward of 45,000 tons, comprising of 2016, 2018, 19, and 20 crops in stock. So from a point of almost no carry stock in 2015 and 16, we had a leftover of different crop years available, and much of it is still there. The question on the minds of everyone is there merit in allowing Myanmar once again to ship the 250,000 tons like earlier, whether it be through the MOU mechanism or import quotas or a mix of both? The first point to note is that India accounts for almost 80% of the Tuar demand from Myanmar. There is virtually no local consumption, and UAE and Nepal are the only two other buyers, but they're much smaller. 2016 and 17 were bumper production years for pulses in India, and there was a very genuine concern in India that if the imports were not restricted, the local Indian farmer could be further distressed, as the prices had already dropped below the MSP rates. Rightfully so, the Indian government acted. They had no option but to. However, the Tuar crop in Myanmar gets planted in July, and by the time the Indian announcement came for Tuar on 22nd of August 2017, most of the 2017 planting was already done. Therefore, we naturally had a very large harvest in Myanmar in December 2017, also because at the time of planting, the prices were very high. The offtake then from India in 2018, 19, and 20 got substantially lower, progressively lower, reducing from about 240,000 tons in 2015 to just 150,000 tons last year, leading to record carry forward stocks in Myanmar into every successive next season. Now, mind you, the Myanmar farmer was growing Tuar for over 20 years, but now he had to look for other crops to replace Tuar. It wasn't easy because the seeds had to be freshly procured and the sales channels had to be created. The farmers zeroed in on cash crops such as sesame seeds, maize, and cotton, which are demand from across the border from China and Thailand. Maize also has a very robust internal demand from the feed industry. The maturing time for Tuar is 6 months, as the farmer plants it in July and the harvest is done in December, Jan. So the farmer has to take the price and the weather risk over a longer period as compared to sesame, for instance, which is only a 100-day duration crop. There is a ready market in China across the land border for sesame, maize, and buyers have their agents in production centers to disperse cash on the spot, whereas in the case of Tuar, the process to payment is much longer. In the case of sesame seed, you typically have one brother sitting at the China border town, another person that goes around to the various production areas during the harvest time for collection. The trucks are loaded to be sent to the border, and as soon as that is done, the cash is paid immediately to the farmer. For Tuar, the farmer has to send material to his agent in Rangoon, and he receives the money after the material is sold to an exporter. But on the flip side, Tuar requires very little effort to grow and is easier on the farmer in terms of cost. So if there is a ready and continuous market, the farmer would definitely prefer to grow Tuar. We all know that when a country like India decides on a quota, there are many factors that are considered by the decision makers. It is not just the demand and supply of the product, but the actions directly affecting a bordering nation have also got to be taken into account. So the MOU number of 100,000 tons, I'm sure, is a very well considered one. But from a trade perspective, there is a very strong feeling that a number significantly higher of the MOU quantity would have had the following four benefits. India's consumption is about 4 million tons. 100,000 tons is just about 2.5% of it. But this 2.5% has a huge influence on prices on the other 97%. This is because demand and supply are evenly balanced. So a small change in quantity has a disproportionate opposite influence on prices. Secondly, till recently, Indian pulse production depended on rains to a very large extent. Today, we have an added uncertainty, which is unseasonal rains at the harvest time, as we have seen in the past few years. So a higher MOU quantity would provide insurance against that because the Myanmar farmer would be incentivized to grow more. The third point is that once the farmer migrates to growing a different crop, it becomes very difficult to bring him back. Large regions in Sagaing, which was the main area for production of tuar, have already moved away, and farmers have no desire to grow tuar again unless they see a pattern of consistent demand. We do not want the remaining farmers who are still growing tuar to consider moving away. And perhaps the Indian government should consider increasing the MOU quantity, as that shall bring many of the central Burma farmers back to growing tuar. This additional quantity shall be just a fraction of India's consumption, but it shall have a great price moderating effect on the full 100% because it shall dissuade hoarding and speculation due to ample availability of the material. In my view, providing assurance of this higher quantity is a very cost-effective method to regulate prices in India of a very staple and sensitive commodity. And lastly, the fourth factor to keep in mind is that as per Bloomberg, the demand for meat-based protein has reduced by about 4% in the US because younger consumers have reduced their animal protein intake for reasons such as better health, climate change, and emission of greenhouse gases. It's a trend that is fast spreading, and it's also due to the sharp rise in prices of animal feed ingredients like corn and soybean meal. This trend shall exert pressure on pulses, which are a natural replacement within the protein food family. So I think it makes a lot of sense for India and other pulse consuming countries to keep their supply sources intact. That said, my request and suggestion is fourfold. Number one, that an increase in the MOU quantity with Myanmar should be considered. Number two, once the OGL period lapses in the month of October, the import license quantity should be announced for a 5-year period so that Myanmar and African growers can plan their production. Third, when import licenses are issued, they should be for a minimum of 125 tons and in multiples of 25 tons, which is the capacity of each container. This is because the minimum economic quantity for shipment is 125 tons. So you can go 125, 150, 175, and multiples of 25. And my last suggestion is that if the total import license quantity for a year is decided at, say, 400,000 tons, which is what it was last year, then the algorithmic selection should permit 100,000 tons per quarter so that the shipments are not bunched together, they're spaced out over a period of the full year, and they do not lead to unnecessary hike in the FOB price or the freight. Now, India is blessed with suppliers in both the hemispheres, Africa in the south and Myanmar in the north. Both have different crop seasons. So limiting the import quantity per quarter to 100,000 tons shall allow a flow of material that should be moderate and in a way that the MSP collection in India is not disturbed. Now coming to containers and freight rates. Container rates to Chennai last year in the month of October were about $400 a container, but they jumped to $3,000 last month and they've receded to $2,100 this month. This volatility is because the shipping industry was suffering losses since 2009, since the Lehman crisis took place, and therefore did not get adequate investments over the last 10 years. Suddenly, the demand-supply mismatch got aggravated with containers getting stuck in North America due to COVID, the Suez Canal incident, and the sinking of a large container vessel off the coast of Sri Lanka. In my view, this mismatch shall continue for some more time because new vessel building shall take years to come on the market, and economic growth has started accelerating with increased vaccinations. Now in Myanmar, what we have done is, in order to moderate the freight rates, we have started using break bulk vessels because they can carry up to 20,000 tons, which is the equivalent of 800 containers at one go. In order to ensure that the qualities like black medpay, FAQ, SQ, tour hole do not get mixed up, and the bags are strong enough and do not bleed, we have told our suppliers to use different color bags and ensure that the outer bag is brand new and is of a minimum 125 grams tear weight. Suppliers have told us that this shall be possible going forward, but it is not possible for the material that is already packed. We feel these two measures shall dramatically improve the experience of shipping and receiving cargo by break bulk. We in Myanmar fully recognize that we shall have to use both these methods to ship break bulk and containers to keep the freight rates from getting unreasonable. Now, talking about the COVID situation in Myanmar, there is no disruption either in terms of shipping or securing certificates. The only scramble that we have is that couriers are operating just once a week, which is a Sunday flight. So if documents such as a phyto certificate are received in the shipper's office on a Monday in Rangoon and need to be couriered, they will have to wait till the following Sunday, which can be a bit of a challenge when you're shipping directly to Chennai on direct vessels, which just take 3 days to get there. But having said that, I think out of all the disruptions that one could possibly face, this is possibly the least that one can expect to face. I'm putting up the crop numbers for the reference. I'm sure a lot of people are waiting for it, and we shall discuss that. Can you see it? So we'll just go through the numbers. Sorry?
From the share screen.
No, it's not being updated. The screen share is not on.
Oh, okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yes, we can see.
Okay, so let us take the numbers for, when we started this year, 2021, we had an opening stock of 45,000 tons. I know different panelists in the past, in the last 2-3 months, have given different numbers, but I'm giving a number that I can sort of defend and be comfortable with. Opening stock of 45,000 tons, 2021 crop, I put it at 80,000 tons. Shipments that have already occurred and contracted but not yet shipped, my estimation is 35,000 tons. And this number I have, after discussing with various members of IMCC, I've estimated this number. This is still the month of June. So we still have a balance of 90,000 tons between now and the end of the year, which is when the new crop comes. Even as far as export numbers are concerned, it depends on what your source is. You could either get it from one of the ministries, or you could get it from MSR, which is a private research organization, which is where I've gotten it from. And these numbers are total figures for all the countries, for all the destinations. I managed to get separate numbers for the years of 2015 and 2020. I've not been able to do that for 2016 to 19 because they bunched everything in beans. So they were not able to segregate exactly as to what it was for Tuar. But these are the numbers. So you can see that from 280,000 tons, we are down to 180,000 tons. And, if we don't do something quickly, this will go down even further, which is why the 4 requests that I made for the authorities to consider. But that said, we come to the end of my presentation. Once again, many thanks to IPGA and IMCC for having selected me as a speaker. And thank you again.
Vatsal, you can stop sharing. You need to stop sharing screen, Vatsal.
Okay.
Thank you, Vatsal, for those numbers and your thoughts. But yes, we have kept the Q&A for the end, but I can't resist asking you this question basis few points that you made. Assuming for a moment that the government of India does decide to increase the MOU quantities or extend OGLs or whichever way, what is the level of production for tool currently in Myanmar, and to what level can it be scaled up to? That's one part of the question. Second part of the question is, how does that map against the production abilities in Africa for the same product tour? And third part of it is, given that the tour harvest time is pretty close to the same as in India for the crop, how will that affect the production in India? What is your estimate on that? What's your thought?
Okay, Pradeep, I'll take question numbers 1 and 3 because the second one is for Africa, which I'm not very conversant with. Your first question was what the quantity should be as far as either the MOU or the import license is concerned, and what is it that
No, Vatsal, my question is, what is the current production level, and to what level can it be scaled up if the environment is conducive for imports of tour from Myanmar? Like you said, if the quantity is increased for the MOU, how much can the Myanmar farmers scale it up from current? And what's the current level, and how much can it scale up?
Okay, understood. So the current level is about between 80 to 100,000 tons, depending on which person you ask this question to. As far as scaling up is concerned, I think we can easily go up to 300,000 tons. With the right sort of incentive and motivation to the farmer, it can be scaled up to 300,000 tons without a problem. So if you're looking at a total consumption in India of 4 million tons, you're looking at less than 10% coming out of Myanmar. Your second question was how it would affect, because we have the same, we share the same sort of production cycle, Myanmar and India. But see, this has been there for a very long time. I mean, Myanmar has been shipping to India for the last 20 years. And, your crop period and Myanmar crop period has been the same. I don't think it has sort of irritated the Indian production in any way, because we all know that India is short. And when you have two ports, which is Mumbai and Chennai, receiving the material, it is those ports and the consumers who are closer to those areas, the mills closer to the area, which are going to be using the imported material. The ones that are in the hinterland would be using the desi material. I mean, this is the way it has been for a long time. Until there is a shortage in the hinterland and they start buying it from the ports. I think they sort of complement each other. I don't think there is crossing of wires in any way.
And just one last question. I don't really know whether it would be too big a difference, but with the change of shipping mode that you all are planning because of the container availability issues, is it going to affect the final pricing, landed price for tour, from just the containers to doing break bulk and the double bagging and everything, different color bags?
Okay, so
that
it's a good
affect
question.
the price, landed price for tour?
No, so it's a good question. So let me reply in detail. I think when you receive cargo and break bulk, typically what happens at the ports is that they disperse 95% of the BL quantity and the balance 5% is held back, which is then given pro rata depending on the BL quantity. But when you have a stronger bag, then the CHA, is incentivized to give out as much as 98%. And when you have an $800 commodity, that extra 3% is almost $25 a ton. So I think by spending $1 or $2 extra for a better bag, you're sort of making it much more convenient for the buyer, for the receiver, to accept break bulk shipments. This is one. Secondly, today you're having an 80-gram bag. Instead of 80, you're migrated to 125. Difference is very marginal. But because you put a 125-gram bag, you have the option of either loading it in containers or loading it in break bulk without spending anything extra. So I think those $2 are well worth it. Now, coming to the freight difference between break bulk and containers, today the container freight is about $85 a ton. If you look at the break bulk, freight that people have paid, it is well under that. The other saving is the THC, because when you get material in containers, you got to pay the THC, which is pretty steep. In the case of break bulk, that particular expense is not to be paid. So overall, I think break bulk is definitely better value if you are able to make sure that your bags are strong enough, that there is no bleeding. The cargo should not arrive in bulk, although it is shipped in bags. And that the labor, what happens at the ports is that the labor is incentivized to throw the bag at the closest pile that they see. Now, they might be having black mat pay SQ, but if there is an FAQ pile very close by, they'll just go and empty it on that pile. And then how do you separate it? So if you have a different color, which is what we're going to do, we're going to have white for FAQ, pink for SQ, and yellow for the tour. Then the labor knows exactly as to which pile to put it in. And if he doesn't do it correctly, then the supervisor can tell him that, listen, hey man, you can't be putting it on that pile. So, when you have this color scheme put in place, it becomes very easy to monitor it.
When is the first such shipment expected to leave Myanmar?
There are 2 vessels under loading at the moment. I think the first one should leave the middle of next week, as what I was informed yesterday. But it again depends on how the weather is between now and then. And the second one, which is a larger vessel, which is about 21,000 tons, again depends on the weather. But if the weather is the way it is today, it might take about 10 days to leave.